All right. All right. It is another Monday. It's another Monday. I mean, they just keep coming like a Pez dispenser, just Monday after Monday after Monday. What are we gonna do? Well, I'll tell you what we're gonna do. We're gonna start off with our top sponsors. So we're gonna say a wonderful thank you to Arete, to FPEA. I mean, their time is getting closer and closer to look forward to starting to register for their upcoming events next year, which is going to be exciting. I saw that they added another Homestead conference to their calendar as well. If you haven't seen that, go check that out. We also want to thank Fisher Precious Metals for being with us. Lots of exciting things happening. I was talking this week with a few other potential sponsors. Maybe one as a top sponsor. They have a. Ooh, I just lost our cameras. There we go. They have a. What do you call it? STEM program, which is exciting, and that really excites us always. Um, and they were really interested in reaching homeschool communities. They had done something similar, I think, out in Kansas, where they were working with the state to try to offer their program through the scholarship system. And I was like, well, we have something similar to that. Let's talk. Um, and yeah, they got like this full on curriculum with the equipment and everything. And, maybe we'll see. We'll see. They're exciting. And then I had a really interesting conversation with a speech and occupational therapy provider that is kind of discovered the homeschool community and was like, we would love to be more helpful. How do we get started? And so we just started talking to them about, all of the ways they were used to working with like schools and early daycares for like early spotting for diagnosing issues, learning disabilities and issues. And uh, when she was referred to me from a friend, and they were just chatting and having coffee, I think. And yeah, so little things like that I'm excited about. It is that time of year. It's fourth quarter. So if you know someone who has a company and they're looking for, ways to spend their marketing budget, HEF, the Home Education Foundation, has HEF Connect, which is our 501c3 nonprofit, which is focused on, opportunities post K 12, and advancing those and kind of building a bridge to success beyond the education. And then we also do a lot, if not all, of our advocacy work under that, and all of the lobbying that we do goes under HEF. So if someone really wants to work and support some of the work that we do, let's say like protecting parents' rights to let their kids play sports at a certain county. We had a really interesting story we could dive into from this past week. The parents were devastated and concerned, and at the end of the week, they were like, "Oh my goodness, we couldn't have done this without you. Like, what can we do?" And it was a really
Donate.
good. It was a really good victory moment um, to overcome that and work with it. We'll dive into that later. But yeah, if you're a company and you're looking for ways to spend or hit certain, you know, tax write-off areas, we're a valid source for that. And we I think we generate somewhere between 20 and 30,000 impressions a month. That goes to about 20 to 30,000 a week during legislative session. So the advertising and visibility opportunities are there and are rich in a loyal homeschool community of parents that care. So those are there, and it's end of year, so people are thinking about that kind of stuff. Remember us? We do still have a great need to fill there. Um, uh, Brenda, where would you like to start today? We got a couple of things we could dive
Well, I,
into.
I was just going to say, just because we don't have the impressions on our website doesn't mean the homeschool community's not getting the information, because they are big on sharing.
Oh
And it
yeah,
could be Facebook pages, which Crystal keeps up
oh yeah.
with, or, word of mouth. But we might have one group leader that listens to all of our stuff and keeps up, and then she shares it with 30, 40 people. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a grassroots chain out there. Just
Mhm.
Absolutely, absolutely.
so
Well,
no,
um,
why don't you start, just a high level overview of what the issue was with that student
Okay.
that you dealt with, and what the confusion is, what we're hoping to change in the upcoming session.
Sure. So the Craig Dickinson Act 1006.15, which allows home education students to play sports um, at public schools, is also extended to PEP students. And that really wasn't the issue here. I think we've worked a lot with some of the districts over the last year and especially several months to where the 2 years, yeah, 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 to where they're starting to realize that PEP students are to be treated and given the same flexibilities and opportunities as home education students. So they've defaulted to a different kind of loophole that's there. And it's the piece that, says they could play for their zoned school or for a school that they could select through open enrollment. And then it links the open enrollment statute. And the way that it's being read is, oh, well, this is not open enrollment window, so you missed it. That's one way. And then the other way that it's being read is, oh, well, there are no academic seats available, so your student can't come to the school, so they can't play for the school either. Which is, it's problematic because if you reverse the logic and say, okay, let's say we applied during the window and our son can
Which
play,
usually is in April
which is a
of the previous year.
right. So then next year our son can play baseball, which, we're really thinking about at that time. But let's say that's what we do, we meet that qualification, great. And there's seats available, great. And then our son starts to play ball. And then the academic seats fill up. Are they going to remove him from the team? No, they're not going to remove him from the team. He's going to play. There's other FHSAA bylaws that govern all of that, but it's one of those things where when you reverse it, you realize that the academic seats are not the deciding factor for athletics, but they're being read to gatekeep that. Anyway, when I talked with this was Clay County. When I talked with the Clay County athletic director, he was very understanding of that, and he went back, talked to the schools that the student was working with. This particular student and his parents were working with. There was an issue at the school they were zoned for where I think one of the coaches was under investigation. They didn't really feel comfortable with that. The school that they were trying to go to was closer to their home, and their student was a new driver, and so they would feel more comfortable with him, driving to a school that's closer. And they were still just being denied because they were like, well, you can't choose that school. You can't choose that school.
Because there were no seats available.
As it turns out, I think there actually were.
Oh.
So it's one of those things where I just think there's this default. When I spoke to him, he had said, well, I heard a talk that someone at the FHSAA had given on the subject and on this. And so he was just kind of going based off of stuff he had heard in a talk. That wasn't like they had specifically looked at all the details of this situation and truly considered the statutes. And when they slowed down to do that, they ended up letting him roll. So this is good. He was wrestling. Yeah.
First victory, yay!
Yeah. It felt really good. I was very excited for the parents. They were very, very much joyful, and I was like, I do get one of these really cool green passes since I'm on the PLAC committee at FHSAA. I could come watch the state series if he makes it, so let me know, and I'll come cheer him on.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's good. We're excited about that. So, but we've had a couple of other. They weren't quite as clear. So the kind of linchpin in this particular situation was that the parents had played at a non-zone school last year. And so there was a precedent that I was able to kind of push on and be like, hey, look, they played at a non-zone school last year. Why can't they play at a non-zone school this year? And he was like, well, okay. So like that was really helpful, but there are other situations in other counties where they're still kind of reading it that way. We want to add language to this to clarify, to really clarify that it's not academic seat specific, that the athletics programs shouldn't be academic seat specific. Seat gate kept, I think, is the better um, way of describing it, but limitations on academic seating shouldn't negatively impact your ability to play athletics. How about that? That's for sure. All right. Well, that was really exciting. I think I could continue to talk about that for hours, but I don't want to bore everybody with
With
that
all
stuff.
the details that go into
Yeah,
it.
because
Yes.
it was days. It was days of fighting and phone calls and trying to get this person and relationships for going down to Gainesville to meet people at the FHSAA board meeting, paid
Yes.
off. Like all
Yes.
of it, it all matters. It's
And
just a
that's the
lot of
kind of
background
work that
time.
we do that people don't realize.
Yeah.
Crystal's done the same thing with the PEP program.
Mm-hmm.
She's advocating for individual parents who have had trouble getting through the system,
Yep.
and it's almost a full-time job. Now we've got two people doing
Yeah.
full-time jobs.
Yeah.
So parents don't realize what a great representation we make for home education families. We have credibility.
Mm-hmm.
We carry a lot of respect
History.
because we've been here. We've been passing the laws,
Mm-hmm.
and it sometimes you just need that extra voice to help parents get what they want. And one of the cases, and I think this was in Palm Beach County, the mom had done unbelievable amount of research. She knew all the laws, but she just could not get past the hurdle that was keeping her child from participation.
Hmm.
Um, it was a little bit difficult to force that because, as I remember the situation, it was a middle school and not a high
Mm.
school. And so the FHSAA only covers middle schools if they're members of the
Mm-hmm.
FHSAA. So
Right.
sometimes it's a little hard to push past the roadblocks, but um,
Yeah.
and we will hit a brick wall sometime, but where we
Yeah.
can, um, bringing in quote the weight of the Home Education Foundation frequently opens the door. So
Yeah.
even though people are not aware of all the work that goes on behind the scenes,
Yeah.
we are here working.
It's a lot. It's a lot. So I also, I mean, speaking of behind the scenes work, this is just troublesome work. I went to a fundraising dinner. Oh, that was hard. No, but I'd ended up meeting several people who work in the Senate office or are an aide. One of the senator's aides was there, and I was like, well, that's interesting. And then there was a bill analyst who was there. We're gonna have dinner with them on Wednesday. It's interesting, just all the connections that people were excited to introduce and start talking about, and so many of the people there were very excited about school choice, even though they weren't all homeschoolers themselves. And a lot of them are just good old people, you know, who support it. So it's interesting to make all those connections and try to be in all of those places. And I'm used to doing that for marketing and going to this event and that event to try to do marketing. But this is, I don't know, it's different. It's interesting. So, so people may be wondering, all right, cool. Well, legislative session's not now, so what is now, and how do we get from where we are now to there, and what's going to happen? So,
It is
um,
now.
well, actually, yeah. So, um, the Senate Democratic Caucus meets to elect its officers for the 24-26. What do you call that? Block, and then tomorrow the organization sessions happen, and that's where they'll switch to the new Senate president. And I believe does the House do it on the same day as well? Do they both do theirs
Typically,
as
I
well?
didn't see it on the calendar,
I
but
didn't either. That's why I was curious to see if it was. I didn't know, so I didn't see it on the calendar. But I thought you might know, based off of past years.
Yeah, past years they do it at the same on the same day. So
Hmm.
like the first Tuesday after the election, although this is not the first Tuesday, it's the second Tuesday, I think, but it kind of varies with the leadership in both the House and the Senate is exactly when they do it. But typically they do their
Hmm.
committee meetings the same week, they do their organizational sessions the same week so they can get going. They've got to appoint committees,
Yeah.
chairs, and all that stuff
Well,
that
the
they have
Florida
to.
Bar, they wrote an article and they said that the House and the Senate would kind of come together to elect their leaders and approve rules for the upcoming um, year. And they, it looks like Republican Ben Albritton is expected to be the next Senate president, and Republican Daniel Perez, a Miami attorney, is next in line to be House Speaker. Presiding officers serve 2-year terms, so that'll be interesting. We'll see. Speaking of that, though, um, Perez, I think he wrote an internal memo that I had pulled up. I've got it up. I don't have the memo up here, but I have the article from the Florida Bar that was kind of reviewing the memo and some of the things that were in it. Um, Also, the 60-day regular session is set to begin March 4th, 2025. So that's cool. Now that we know that, we have that information. This was a memo on the 13th, and Perez says the House will be discontinuing its, quote, traditional complicated system of multiple drafting, submission, and bill filing deadlines. The House will now have a single bill drafting submission deadline of Friday, January 24th, and a single bill filing deadline of Friday, February 28th, 2025. Um, and that is for all 7-member bill slots. The new configuration should reduce confusion, provide adequate time to draft bills, and expedite the referral process at the beginning of the regular session. Um, I thought that was interesting. The um,
Make it easier.
yeah,
Yeah.
I would hope so. There are also combined work groups. So a combined work group will be a forum of an, quote, intensive examination of a single issue across multiple subject matter jurisdictions. According to the memo, the chairs of the committees and subcommittees forming the work group will select the members of the work group, and one member will be chosen as the work group manager. They will meet over a short period of time, 14 days, and they will have a 24-hour meeting notice requirement. The combined work group would facilitate an open conversation between members, according to the memo. And, quote, unlike a select committee, these recommendations would not be in the form of a report generated by staff, but would be made by motion by members in an open meeting, and the resulting work product could be considered as the basis for a proposed committee bill by one of the involved committees or subcommittees. So that I think that's useful. I think that's really useful. Uh, weren't you saying that there were work groups that they had before and they had kind of discontinued those?
Back around 2000 to 2005,
Hmm.
sometimes the work groups were set up within the Department of Education for specific kinds of um, issues. And then those work groups um, would make recommendations to the legislature, and they brought in stakeholders. So, like on school choice, they may have a work group, if it were today, made up of AAA scholars, Step Up for students, private school representatives,
Okay,
homeschool representatives. That they were stakeholders in the issue, not necessarily legislators.
got you.
So, and legislated, they've set up those committees in the past. I remember serving on a couple where they were just trying to gather information and get some guidance. There was
Hmm.
one when they were creating first the John McKay Scholarship. There was a work group made up of, I mean, there were a couple of legislators on there, but typically they were
Right.
stakeholders in the issue. I
Okay.
served on one of those for the legislature. So those are really great. And I wish and I hope, even though these are going to be made up by legislators,
Right.
my hope is that we would have the opportunity to contact the legislators that are serving on those, because some of the issues that we're dealing with right now
Mm-hmm.
should have been taken care of when the PEP scholarship was passed.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't want to consider it, or they were pushing it too fast. The legislators didn't know the complexity of the home education rights and freedoms in Florida. So they just put in this little tiny reference to the home education law and said they'll have all PEP students will have all the freedoms and flexibility
Mm-hmm.
as homeschoolers, but they didn't address all of the other
The
statutes.
ways that it has to practically play out.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So
Who's got to do what to make that a
yeah,
thing?
and
Yeah.
that would have made this whole process so much easier instead of having to deal with each
Yeah.
individual district because they didn't want to make a contract so that parents could take
Mm-hmm.
classes. If we just put that in statute,
And they
it
won't
would have
do
been
anything unless the
clear.
DOE gets on their back and tells them to. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm hoping
Yeah.
that, if we know before the night before, which they said a 24-hour
24
notice,
hour notice. Yeah.
that
Oh.
they should notice the members of the work group at least a week before. And if you know what the subject is, then we can be
Mm-hmm.
talking to them about the issues that we think should be brought up in that discussion. So we'll see how it works out. But 24-hour notice is very difficult. And frequently, that's how we get the agendas for the committee meetings.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to round up volunteers to come and testify on a 24-hour notice.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's like 5 o'clock and the meeting is at 10 o'clock the next morning or 8 o'clock the
Yeah.
next morning. People just can't.
Well, speaking of those deadlines, one of the other things in the memo, he says in the past, House rules had different times for various deadlines associated with the committees. For example, the committee notice deadline was 4:30 p.m., while the amendment deadline was 6. So committee deadlines will now uniformly be set at 5. So I don't know if that'll help. It does seem like they're trying to streamline and be more uniform so that, you know, it's just easier to keep track of things and then perhaps be more nimble. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, let's
Um,
hope that works that way because it is a
I do.
nightmare.
Yeah,
It is
it
a
was pretty
nightmare
crazy.
to try to keep up with everything.
Yeah.
And then if they drop amendments and the amendments happen to be 100 pages, you got to read all of that,
Yeah.
try to get talking points,
Yeah.
try to find people to testify before the meeting the next
And that
morning.
would drop at 11 p.m. for us on the website when it would finally come up. And then it's like, oh, by the way, at 9 a.m., they're hearing it.
Yeah,
And you're like,
exactly.
what?
Right. So a lot of people out there go, well, I'd love to come, but I
Yeah.
need like a week's notice. I'm sorry, we don't have a week's notice,
Yeah. Right. As far as
If
getting
it's
parents to
important,
come.
we need you to drop what you're doing and head this way.
Right.
So,
Right.
Which some families did last
yeah,
year,
yeah.
which was
Yeah. And
amazing.
we're
We
very
had
thankful
someone,
to
I
those.
think the farthest I know for sure someone drove was like 5 hours,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
it was very short notice. I think she found out about it like a couple days before maybe.
I think it was a day, like a day and a
Yes.
half before. And she was like, I'll be there. I'm like, whoa.
Mhm.
That was
5 hours
phenomenal.
each way. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Another thing that I thought was interesting, and I think this is probably the last part. Um, well, let's see. It was in the rules and ethics, I believe. So in recent years, Perez says the House has increasingly pushed into the hands of staff the quote unpleasant task of addressing breaches by members of House policy, protocol, and decorum. I find this practice to be inappropriate, Perez said. And so he said the Rules and Ethics Committee may reprimand the member, recommended administrative remedies to the Speaker, or recommend action by the House. So this process will be separate from the formal complaint process, and the Rules and Ethics Chair will have discretion on what matters to bring before the committee. As members, he says, we, not staff, are responsible for governing our behavior, for determining the line between acceptable and unacceptable conduct, and for holding one another accountable, end quote. So I like that. I thought that was good. It was good. I know I really felt like staff ran the show.
Exactly. And they did.
And yeah, and almost to the point where, they're not the ones that got elected. Like people voted and elected their representatives, and it's almost kind of like, I think, maybe there's a little too much that they're doing, but anyway.
But to our benefit,
Yes,
we can't always get to the members.
that's true.
And so getting to the staff that will
Mm-hmm.
get the message to the member is about the only way we're going to be able to get to them. So
Mm-hmm.
staff is important, but they shouldn't be
Absolutely.
running the show.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is a good step, like a step in the right direction. Do the incoming speaker, do they get to do this each year? Does this change each time? Can they make the rules and adjust?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I didn't
They
I
can
wasn't
reconfigure committees from the year, the prior speaker.
Mhm.
They don't like the way they're made up. They can do all that. So it's, their show for the year, 2 years.
Okay. There is some lobbyist disclosure updates too, which I thought were interesting. So
Oh,
that's
great.
what we'll do. So
More
we'll read those.
reporting.
So House rules require lobbyists to disclose to the House the specific bills and appropriations on which they're lobbying to facilitate improved compliance with House rules. House policies will now specify that staff must confirm that a lobbyist has filed a disclosure prior to scheduling a meeting on a specific bill, appropriation, or issue. Is that new?
Well, the way you read that sounded like we were going to have to notify a member if we were going to meet with them. In the past, when we registered, we listed the bills that we were going to be working on or the issues we were going to be working on. We didn't have to notify specifically any individual. We did have to file notices if we wanted to speak in the committee.
Right.
But
Right.
we also at earlier stage, when we're registering, I believe it's when we register as lobbyists for that year,
Hmm.
there's an opportunity for us to put on there which issues or which bills, if there are bills already being filed that we're going to be working on.
Yeah, I don't. This last session, and maybe it's because it's an election year, but I don't remember seeing the bills as something I could select from when registering for lobbying this past year. So, is that going to be a part of the sign up process this coming year, or do you think that's going to be a separate process? Um, I don't know.
I
I
don't
don't know.
know.
I don't know how that works. That's interesting. Um,
At
upon
some
receipt of
point, we have to register which bills we're working on or which issues. So, we would
Yeah.
put school choice, we might put
Okay.
home education issues,
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
just
I do remember
generally,
I
unless
do
a
remember
bill
putting
comes
that.
up. Yeah.
Right. I do remember putting that general information in. Yeah. So this another bullet point says upon receipt of any information, formal or informal, that indicates that a lobbyist has failed to disclose their activities as required by the House rules, the Rules and Ethics Committee chair will have the authority to investigate the matter. If a lobbyist does not promptly remedy their failure to disclose the matter, they may be brought before the Rules and Ethics Committee in a public meeting for a hearing and sanctions. Um, the penalties for failure to disclose lobbying activity will be expanded to include the levying of fines.
The what?
The levying of fines.
Oh,
The House will have a zero tolerance policy for any attempt to avoid, manipulate, or undermine the lobbyist disclosure system. I mean, I think accountability of lobbyists is good. So I'm not upset by any of that. I just, so many papers, so many letters, so many T's to cross and I's to dot. It's like,
and penalties,
okay.
I mean, for not filing your quarterly report on time, it's a $50 a day
Yeah. Yeah.
fine,
Yeah.
so And then the fun
Mhm.
part is you could be randomly chosen through a lottery to be audited as a lobbyist. And then you have to have all your documents in order, and it's a nightmare. I went through it. I mean, I wasn't even making any money. My reports were 0, 0, 0 for 4 quarters, and doesn't matter. You still have to present all your stuff, and it took me
Yeah.
a lot of time to do that. So they don't want just how much were you paid. They want copies of the checks. They want copies of the deposit slips. It's like, really?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's fun. Being a lobbyist has its, I don't know. I was going to say downsize, down. What's that
Yeah,
word?
there's ups and
Downsides?
downs. Well,
Sides. I was side. Yeah.
oh man.
Anyway, but
Yeah.
we do it because we care about the rights and privileges
Absolutely.
of home education. Families in Florida, and Florida's got such a good climate for home education.
Hmm. It does. It really does right now. And I know I can't say who they are, but I know that they're especially on the subjects of the sports and things like that. There are a couple um, of our representatives and senators who are taking an active interest in those. So we're hopeful to get some of that cleaned up. And we would like to slip in digital digital devices and some updates to clean up the scholarship program since it is a an adjustment to PEP as well as the home education clarification. Maybe
Right.
maybe there will be a window to kind of add some of the clarifying or add some of those other um, things that you know we know we all need. So I did hear a difference. Okay, good, 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 good. Crystal, you'll have to speak up. I think
I'll
because they
try.
were they were saying that you were kind of quiet whenever you spoke. So I don't have anything in addition to what we've been discussing so far that kind of runs the gamut of topics that I had prepared. I think
Well, I
maybe
have one
looking at.
comment. I have
Go
one
ahead.
comment to make.
Go ahead.
Um, it would be extremely helpful to us if people that are listening to our broadcast or get the information out that have worked in a campaign or
Mm-hmm.
know a legislator, Senate, a Florida legislator, House representative, or a senator to let us know, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes an issue can be changed by one representative who is
Mm-hmm.
in leadership. And if we don't know you know them, we can't use your contacts. And it really does help us get our work done here. So if you
Mm-hmm.
know somebody, have worked with somebody, it's somebody's cousin that whatever, let us know what your relationship is to the legislators, and let us use your contact information in order to
Yes.
get their attention.
Crystal, could you add a section to our forum that just like did you what would you say? Did you walk with a
Who do you know?
who do you know? How about that one? There we go.
Yeah, so
And then
I think maybe we haven't created a section for this year's legislative session that's coming up.
right.
We had one for
Yeah.
last year's.
Right.
So, do you want me to create that and put that inside there, or do you want it to be its
No, well, yeah, I guess. I was thinking more in general, have one like a who do you know one where, people can post like, oh, we walked with so and so, or we, spent time with here, or we met so and so at dinner, or we did this, or, the little things like that. Just knowing that the connections exist,
Well, the
we can
name
follow
first
up.
and then the connection next.
Well, their name will be when they post, their name will be
Okay.
there. So, but then we have everybody who posts, as a member, so we have the ability to kind of contact them through the forum after they've posted. We can contact them privately. So just putting in there like the who's who, if you're connected to someone or have a connection, that would be
And then tell them we have lobbyists in Tallahassee representing our interests, and here are their
Yeah.
names,
Yep.
so that you make the introduction. One of our best contacts 2 years ago came through a home education leaders, and she called the senator and said, hey, you need to talk to, at that time you weren't here, it was Brenda Dickinson, and here's her number.
Right. Yep.
And so he called me and we had a nice long chat. It
Mhm.
wasn't until the end of session or the next year that I actually met him face to face, but he was great help behind the scenes.
Sure.
So
And that from what I understand, that's kind of the way it goes. I've only been doing this 1 year with you now, so
I know.
wow, it's fascinating how quickly things can change. Uh, well, are there any updates, Crystal, to Step Up for Students or Purchasing Guide? I think you said over the past week that funding, was it this week or last
Yeah.
week?
It was just a few days ago. Funding for
Mm-hmm.
quarter two dropped for PEP.
Started to drop. Yeah.
Um, and I've been seeing a scatter. They didn't all drop on the same day, but I think a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
have been funded by now for quarter two.
Okay.
Um,
I do want to follow up because we had I think it was back in October. We had I mean just a bunch of accounts got switched from PEP to EO randomly. And then there were parents who were still applying and then they would get approved for EO but not PEP and they're like we got approved for the wrong scholarship. So there was like a glitch in their system and I think the person that I had talked to over there, they have gotten to the bottom of it and figured that out. But there are still I mean, they were still dealing with some issues from 23, 24, in addition to these glitches, and there's a mess. There's a lot of parents who are um, trying to switch scholarships as well, so that
yeah.
it's creating a bunch of confusion. But I will say I had some parents who reached out and we were able to connect, you know, with our contact at Step Up for Students and get a lot of those resolved for parents, like a lot. I mean, there was a week where I couldn't go 20 minutes without getting an email or two from parents, and it was at 1 a.m. You know, like it's constant, and I was just like, wow, all right. So there were a lot of issues that came through, and we worked to kind of escalate those and pass them on. We're not affiliated with Step Up for Students. We're not a part of their customer service. We
We're
work
not
to.
paid by them.
We're not paid by them at all. So we're solely supported only by donations from our community and vendor sponsors and stuff like that that believe in the work that we do. But there was a couple of those that were just big hairy messes that also got caught in the glitch. In addition to the problem they were also struggling on, and these parents were just hopeless. They were like, I don't know, I've given up. I don't know what to do anymore. I've talked to everyone I can talk to. It doesn't seem like you're getting anywhere either. And I just hesitated to respond to some of those because I was like, I'm just gonna wait. I don't wanna like give false hope, but I also don't wanna like jump on the down train when there could be hope. So I just kind of waited, and I got another email like the next day, like the very next day, and they were like, "Oh my goodness, it's resolved. This is incredible. Thank you so much." And I'm like, sometimes it's just wait is the answer.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's very tough.
Unfortunately, we don't control their database.
We do
I
not.
think I think we could make a few changes, not me,
I could
but
make some
you.
recommendations, sure.
But
But
you know, it's a huge job,
task. Mm-hmm.
and I think that the
Mm-hmm.
scholarship funding organizations are doing the best they can with
Yeah.
all of the variations. You think about, it's hard enough to get people in the private schools and get the private schools approved for the program, but that's simple
Mm-hmm.
compared to the individual choices that parents have, and then all of the reimbursements and the scholarship and all that. That's been great that there's in the scholarship, because they don't have to approve all of those reimbursements if it comes right out of the
Right.
scholarship. But still, parents only see their particular situation. And I know it's expensive on some of these things that parents have bought and they're waiting for
Yep.
reimbursements. And I understand limited income when only one parent's working, the other's homeschooling. But,
Yep. Oh yeah.
this is a major, major change in the way that education is being offered and delivered in the
Hmm.
state of Florida. So, you
And
got to
I think there's more
anticipate some
changes coming.
problems.
So
Huh?
I said I think there's more changes coming.
Yeah, but
From what
right
I
now there's
understand.
60,000 parents,
Yeah.
kids that have gotten scholarships. And so
Hmm.
you multiply that times the reimbursements on little items such as art supplies
And they're
and
not automatic. They have processors doing this
right.
like by hand.
300 they hired. I don't know if they've hired more than that, but
I imagine so.
and there's problems with one processor approving and one processor not
Hmm.
approving the same item. And yeah,
That's why you'll
we
end up
know
with
all that. And
inconsistencies. Yep.
there just got to be some understanding that this dropped suddenly, like
Yeah.
May and July, they had to implement the program. So they're still
Hmm.
working on those issues from the first year. And
Yeah.
hopefully we're, getting closer to have it working like a clock. But
I think so. I really do. It seems like more and more um, the issues that they're running into are anomalies and not like regular. So I would like to think that
I
there's
don't
just some
handle all those issues Crystal does, bless her heart.
yeah,
I'm
there's just
so
some other stuff
grateful.
that they keep doing with the purchasing guide changes and stuff that I scratch my head on and go, well, that's going to create like 13 more issues. So
Yeah, some of
good
the
luck with
recent
that.
changes have just created a lot of
Yeah,
confusion, so that's
yeah, it'll and
Give
the
us
more
some examples.
inconsistency, yeah, the more inconsistency that you show, the harder it is for people to trust you. So it's very much that's really important that they really
Can
get
you give
those.
us an example,
No,
Crystal?
I don't want to.
we may not want to. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, there have been some confusions over things that are approved or not approved, and parents are couple that with the inconsistency of the processors approving or not approving things that actually are in the handbook as approved, but some processors just kick it back or are
Mm-hmm.
rejecting it for information that's literally there, but they are not seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just been very confusing for a lot of parents all year long. It seems
Yeah.
like I'm hesitant to say this, but it seems like the processing has gotten worse this year than last year. Last year, the issue was that it just took forever. This year, it's just chaos. Like,
Mm.
you parents cannot have confidence that something is gonna be approved even if it's listed in the handbook. So,
Do you think that even the processors have some prejudice toward the freedoms that home education families have?
that's
They
possible. Um, I I don't know if it's that or if it's a training issue or if it's internal debates that are happening over what the wording in the purchasing guide means. Like, I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
something needs to be there needs to be more uniformity among what's approved and what's not, and it needs to be spelled out clearly, and that needs to be followed rather than it being whatever haphazard mess is happening right now because
Mm-hmm.
this year has been bad in regards to that. It really
Hmm.
has.
Yeah. It's been on odd stuff. I think one of the things I feel comfortable mentioning was that the age restriction for uh certain items or was it across board or was it books or was it curriculum?
Okay, so I have seen reports of multiple things being denied for what they're saying is for age restrictions, but
Mm-hmm.
something like a puzzle that says recommended for ages 12 and up, and it was purchased for an 11-year-old,
11-year-old.
and they denied it.
Right.
And so it's kind of like the common sense factor is lacking. Like an 11-year-old
Mm-hmm.
year old is capable of doing a puzzle for 12 and up. There's no those age restrictions in the handbook are supposed to be for safety issues. Like,
Mm.
you can't purchase a workout equipment for an 11-year-old that's for adults because it's a safety
Right.
issue.
Right.
It shouldn't be applied to things like curriculum and learning manipulatives, but it is being applied. And so then we had to have those conversations, like every kid is functioning at a different level in different subjects. Like
And different
that's
subjects,
not
right?
going to work.
Like one kid maybe on multiple different
Yeah.
levels.
So
Well, that's what I mean, that the uniformity of public school versus the freedom of home education that allows you to customize the education for that particular child.
Right.
yeah.
People
Yeah.
just don't
Don't get it.
get it. They
In
don't
Yeah.
that
get it unless
instance,
they're in it.
Right.
yeah, in that instance, I do think that that was the case, that it
Mm-hmm.
was, the processors are not familiar with home education.
Right.
But in some of the other issues, it seemed more like maybe just carelessness or lack of training. Like the processors are demanding all kinds of documentation up above and beyond what should like asking the parents to send pictures of the items to prove that it is in fact educational, like what's on the receipt. And I
Yeah.
guess the handbook gives them the ability to do that if there's ever a question about the item, but they're just doing it on a
Mm-hmm.
mass scale and making parents jump through all these hoops to get something that should be pretty straightforward, like a anywhere from learning manipulatives to tutoring. And I know with tutors, some of it is the statute issue of how it requires them to vet individual tutors, even if they work
Mm-hmm.
for a company. But I've heard of parents sending in legitimate documentation for tutors, and it's still getting kicked back.
Yeah.
So it's
I have
just I don't know exactly what's going on, but there's
I
definitely
have noticed that they're trying though. Like even with the educational benefit form, the recent changes to the educational
simplified
benefit
the form,
form,
which
yeah, trying to streamline and
I think
simplify
is
things for
a
parents.
step in the right direction, because now the educational benefit form used to ask for the parents to list whether a curriculum was being used with the item, and if so, what the curriculum was, and it wanted a hyperlink to the
Mm-hmm.
exact item if it was being purchased online, and it had all this information you had to put in. And parents were having to fill this out for every item within certain categories that they were
Mm-hmm.
submitting
Wow.
for reimbursement. Now the form basically just asks what is the educational benefit of this item, and it's like it's a much simpler form.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping that that's a sign that they are trying to put the authority on the parent more to determine whether something's educational, and if you can make a basic argument that it's educational, then it will be approved. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, that's what it seems to be. It seems to be a
Less
move. I know that
micromanaging.
some parents were a little upset by the change. I guess like a
Well, they
meaningless
said it just
form is
makes
now
the
more meaningless or something.
yeah, I
Yeah.
I saw some comments from parents who were saying that the form is kind of pointless. Like, why do we even have to
Mm.
fill this out? But the more generic, the better, I think, for that particular form, because
Yeah. Oh, well, and then whenever, some of those items, not that we want to see this, but, whenever the legislature leans on the SFO to go, hey, why was this purchased? Why was that purchased? And there's an educational benefit form attached to explain the reasoning. Like it's useful to be able to provide that feedback to them directly from that and be able to make a case for it. And then they go, oh, okay, cool. Uh, as Brenda was saying earlier, there's so many people who don't even really understand home education. I think even with the was it growth, three times growth or something of post COVID of the homeschool community across the country,
Right.
we're still like 4% of the population as a whole. So we're still microscopic in terms of um, everyday normative. Everybody knows what it is. A lot of people love their freedoms, and when they recognize the choices for what they are, they go, "Oh, that's cool." So that it's different than the attitude we had from the '80s, but it doesn't mean that people understand what it
Right.
is, and how it's protected, and what's important, what's really important for us. Character above everything. Character and critical thinking above everything. Like I'll throw any curriculum out that I have to if it's a struggle or a problem. If my kids come out with a good moral character and they can think critically, they can Google the rest. Like
Exactly.
that's that's like that's my mindset. Like I
Well,
teach
there are
them to
too many
parse
facts for you to keep them all in your head anymore.
so
So
many. And there's so
Yeah,
many updates.
the basics are important, and then teach them how to research
The
so
world's
they
full of
find what they
information.
want. Yeah.
That's right. Teach them how
I
to research.
I want
Sorry.
to put one more thing in here
Go.
that came up. I had a fairly long conversation with uh, her children already finished home education, but apparently she's still doing some evaluation for homeschoolers. And she was
Okay.
on Facebook and she said, I can't believe the scholarships are allowing people to take trips to Europe. And I said, they're not. And
They're
she
not.
said, well, they're putting this on Facebook. And I said,
Hmm.
well, they may have been able to use the money they were getting that they were paying for a private school. And now they've decided they want a PEP scholarship, which frees up the money in their family that they can take a trip to
Mm-hmm.
Europe. And yes, it is educational, but
Mm-hmm.
um, we shouldn't be posting those things on Facebook without a great deal of explanation, because I said the purchasing guide does not
Sure.
allow somebody to take their family to Europe.
Yeah, and when
And
you add to that the fact that so many people don't know anything about any of this anyway, their perception as an outsider looking on, going, "Oh, you use the scholarship to take trips around the world," when like they don't understand it would only cover tickets to the museum, period. It won't cover travel or meals or lodging or any of that stuff that really the bulk of the expenses to make the trip. So it's one of those things where uh, people who are not in the weeds, they don't understand that. They just look outside from an outsider's perspective, look on and go, "Oh my goodness, the scholarship money is going to fund trips around the world." What?
Yeah.
yeah,
Not only
Yeah.
that, but there are all kind of restrictions on like prorated costs. Like they don't pay for the
Mm-hmm.
parents. They'll only pay for the
Correct.
individual child and only the
Yep.
child that is on the scholarship. So if you buy a family pass, they prorate the cost. They
Mm-hmm.
actually will kick back a family pass if there was an individual pass available, which is another thing that parents have had some frustration with because it's way more affordable to buy the
Mm-hmm.
family pass, but the scholarship, they added a rule where they won't cover a family pass if you could have purchased an individual pass for the child. So they're no longer prorating the cost for those unless there was no other option than a family pass. So I mean, there's so many restrictions already in place, sometimes maybe too many restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
And the media is not communicating those at
They just
all.
love
right.
sensational stories. Like, oh my goodness, can you
But
believe that?
that's the thing that legislators pick up, because the
Sure.
media has distorted the facts,
Right.
and then
Oh,
it
they love
makes the
that.
legislators look bad.
Yep.
And so then they try to protect, their reputation for not just handing out money to
Mm-hmm.
people willy-nilly. But that pass has been a bone of contention, with legislators. And so I can see why the scholarship guide is specific about what they will and won't pay for to, Epcot
Yeah.
or wherever they're going.
Sure. And I
SeaWorld.
get the knee jerk reaction too, because like I said, you've got a bunch of public people who pay their taxes looking on from the outside who don't understand any of the nuances of this or what is approved and what isn't approved. They just hear what somebody posted. And then you've got the legislators who are responding to all of that, and they might not know either. In fact, I would venture to guess they don't know, unless we could sit down and have these work groups or info dump sessions where we can go, okay,
Right.
here's the weeds and here's the high points and here's what you need to know and here's like trying to Google today just to find whether the House and the Senate are doing their organizational sessions or not. Like the information's not always easily available to kind of find that find that piece that you need. And so when you're Googling and trying to figure out, is this really what is happening? And then, 6 out of 8 or 8 out of 8 news places are taking up all the search spots with the same story over and over and over, be it true or not. That's what everybody hears. That's what everybody's going to know.
Well,
So,
this particular person even brought up the 55-inch TV,
mm-hmm.
and that was one of the big issues that was brought up last session about
Mm-hmm.
this time when they had a panel brought in from the scholarship funding
I remember
organizations.
that.
Why are you approving a 55-inch TV? Well, there was a logical reason.
Mm-hmm.
He gave a very good explanation,
Yeah,
actually,
John Curtley
for the
did.
educational use for a TV.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, those arguments are not what's being shared
Put
and
it
Yeah.
to
heard.
the me.
Yeah.
No. Okay, a kid bought a 50 that was allowed to buy a 55-inch TV, and then the reason was, but the media doesn't put that.
Yeah.
So
Well, and that I think also is a lack of understanding of how home education works. Like so many of us have multiple kids and we use videos as part of our home education, and having something to actually show the videos on that they can all see while they're at the table doing their work is a valid educational expense, but um that's not the perspective that it's being addressed with in the media for sure.
Mm-hmm.
no, the media is not in favor of alternatives. So
No. No, and they're not gonna put the stories where the districts are dragging their feet becoming providers because, you know, some of the parents want to actually take classes there, especially some of the specialized ones, but the districts are dragging their feet. But no one's gonna report on that.
I
Just that they're trying to buy them at theme parks.
I just have this policy. I'm not talking to to the media. They'll call me. Would you make a comment on something? No, because you will not quote me accurately, and
That's
I
right.
don't trust the media,
Yeah.
so I don't talk to them. I mean,
I think I heard Tucker Carlson say something similar,
but
just with different words.
the thing that I had that conversation with this lady. Well, I just want to see how this works. This was back when they were first talking about the scholarships and shouldn't they give money to homeschoolers? That was the question. And I said, no, no, they should not. Well, could you just arrange for us to see some homeschool and just talk to them? So I said, well, what's the thrust of your article? Because
Yeah.
we're not in favor of it. What are you going to say? Oh, we just want to talk about home education. Well, I took them to
Mm-hmm.
3 homes. They interviewed all three of the parents said, no, we do not want government interference in our programs. So we don't want money. And then
Mm-hmm.
they twisted that at the end and made it sound like all three of those parents had said, yes, they could use help with
Mhm.
purchasing curriculum. This was like in 2005 or something. I said, that's it. No more interviews.
Yeah. Yeah, that's their job. I mean,
Journalistic
that's what they
integrity,
do.
man. Like
There's not such a thing anymore, I don't think.
you you
They
should
get
be
paid
able
to
to go
sell
in
copies, to
go
sell
in with an
clicks.
open mind rather than going in with an agenda that you're just going to
Mm-hmm.
bend all your quotes to. But
Yeah, well,
that's not what's happening. So, we do
no,
have a
that's
parent
not what's
we
happening.
do have a parent comment here I wanted to read.
Go ahead.
This is from Deline Howell. I did not understand the complexity of homeschooling until I was doing it. The logistics of tailoring homeschooling for individual children isn't black and white. One student can be doing multiple different levels at the same time, and each way could hypothetically be being done in unconventional ways. There's
Mm-hmm.
no way SFO can encompass all educational items or even curriculum itself by being specific. They're going to need to stick to the general rules, which they've written themselves, so is a huge complaint from me as a parent that the reimbursement approvals are inconsistent. To a low income family, it
Mm-hmm.
definitely puts us in a bad position, scared to use the scholarship money.
I feel that last statement.
This is
I
a
really
point
feel that.
this is a
Yeah.
point that we have been trying to bring up repetitively
Mm-hmm.
to the SFOs is parents are afraid not to use the scholarship because they're not sure they're going to be able to get reimbursed. And not everything is in the scholarship.
Right.
Tutoring and classes, dance instructors that you might want to have for your
Mm-hmm.
student, they're not all direct pay providers. And
Mm-hmm.
parents are literally afraid to use the money because they may not get reimbursed. And not every
Right.
parent can afford to be out that money if the reimbursement doesn't come through.
Right.
Especially when a lot of these places require you to sign a commitment to continue classes for a certain amount of time or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
then the other issue is that the scholarship has a good variety of items for certain ages, but not so
Mm-hmm.
much for older
Right.
kids. And so now parents are afraid to spend money on curriculum and items for kids because it may not be reimbursed. So
Right.
there's just there's a lot of perception work to be done, I think, to get them to see that Delene is correct that they're not going to be able to get specific enough to include everything. Like there needs to be, my opinion is the whole thing could be simplified and put the responsibility back on the parents to vet where it's educational or not with minimal oversight from the SFOs. That would be the ideal. But
It would be ideal, but again, we come back to
yeah.
the knowledge gap, and that's why the Tell Your Story project on our website, flhef.org/tell your story, is so important, because it'll allow you to make what is relatively basically a TikTok video, 60 seconds or less, and just tell why you home educate. Like we started it because we wanted to do this. Quick answers, and then talk about the impact that it's had. We've been doing it for however many years. Here's what we've seen it do for our children, and then just show snippets of them. I got a video of Chunky, our youngest, who's now 5. Happy
His
birthday!
He
name is
does have a
Allison.
real name.
He
He does
does.
have a
He
real name.
does.
Well,
Everyone calls him Chunky, though.
yeah.
Literally everyone. I mean,
But he had
except
a
for me.
lab coat on, and he had the glasses, and he was pouring something in a
I actually
vial,
posted
and
that on my Facebook page today. If any of
yeah,
you are
yeah.
Facebook friends with me.
And I'm like little things like that. Just throw them in the background and talk from the heart about what home education is for you, uh, why you do it, and what impact you think you've seen on your kids.
And you can
And
submit more than one video too if
you
you have
can,
a lot of stuff and you kind of want to go different themes, like
right?
however you want to do it. There's
I know
not a
some of
limit.
you have
You can
11
submit
Well,
children.
I
more.
loved what Deneen just said is, I didn't
Mm-hmm.
understand home education until I started it. Now I realize I can customize
Yeah,
the education based on my
that's right.
child's ability at certain levels. And, you know,
Delene, you've been nominated to do a
yes,
video on
yes,
that
for
topic.
several.
Please do several. We'd love to hear more about that from you.
Yes.
That'd be great. That'd be
Oh, just
fantastic.
as a side note,
Yeah,
while we were talking, I set up the Who Do You Know section of the forum. So there's a place
cool.
now there where you can post the name of who you know and what position they're in, and then if that ends up being a connection that is useful, we'll follow up with you through the forum, um,
Absolutely.
so that you can help kind of connect us with that person. I
Good.
also went ahead and set up a section in the forum for the 2025 legislative session. There's nothing there yet, but it's just a
Cool.
placeholder for you to kind of follow. As we get further into the sessions, there will
And
definitely be stuff going on
we'll
there.
drop our notes once we get them completed. We'll drop our notes for what we're working on there as kind of like the top post of the stuff. Our dream board of what it is we would like to see happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get all of those things,
Right,
but we'll
right.
we'll post those and put those there so that people know what we're working on and what's important to us for this upcoming year. So I don't have anything else. I think that's a great thing. If you would drop that into the chat, the that link into the actual
Yeah, I'll
comment
drop them both
section,
there.
so that people will have it, and then I'll wrap us up here. Brenda, you always get final say. Well, is there anything that you would like to say before we wrap up today?
I don't. We're just
Yeah.
hoping that we have a really great session. We have some uh, great contacts in the
Yes.
Senate and parents that do understand home education because they've home
Mm-hmm.
educated. And that's so helpful when we
Yes.
have legislators that understand because they can help us with the education part of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and go back to our sponsors. We want to tell you thank you once again. We always do this because you mean so much to us. You make it possible. So thank you to Arete, thank you to FPEA, and thank you to Fisher Precious Metals. And then also thank you to all of the families that I see the notifications come in. We had a couple of families that I saw cancel, and I was like, oh man. And when I reached out to them, they go, we wanted to donate at a higher tier. And I was like, that's cool. That's great. They
Yeah,
canceled that lower one and
thank you
donated at
very
a higher
much.
tier. Thank you very much. We thank you guys for being arm in arm with us, and we appreciate it. We'll see y'all next week. We will still be doing it next week because it'll be Monday. I know that's Thanksgiving week, but it'll be a great way to start the week and be really thankful for a lot of stuff. So we'll see y'all next week.